They are stuck, not because they lack opportunity, not because they are not trying, not because the universe is against them. They are stuck because pain has become their identity, the only self they know, the only reality they can recognize. They wake up in pain, live in pain, make decisions from pain, build relationships around pain, and when something good tries to enter, when growth tries to emerge, when success tries to manifest, their system rejects it, not consciously, energetically. Because growth requires becoming someone they do not recognize, someone who is not in pain, and they do not know how to be that person. Pain is not just what they experience, pain is who they are. And Owen Hermstring discovered that this creates a specific kind of blockage, an energetic blockage, a spiritual blockage that prevents physical growth, financial abundance, relationship fulfillment, not because they are unworthy, but because their entire energetic system is calibrated to pain. And anything that vibrates at a different frequency, joy, abundance, success, love, cannot integrate, cannot land, cannot stay, because the system only knows pain, and what you only know is what you only allow. Owen Hermstring, building on Jungian depth psychology, identified what he calls the pain identity complex. This is different from trauma, different from suffering. It is when pain stops being something you experience and becomes something you are. When your sense of self is so deeply intertwined with struggle, with hardship, with suffering, that you cannot imagine yourself without it. And most people do not realize they have done this. They think they want to be free, think they are working toward growth, think they desire success. But their energetic system tells a different story. Their nervous system is calibrated to pain. Their subconscious expects suffering. Their spiritual energy is blocked by the identity of being someone who suffers, and this creates a pattern Hermstring calls energetic rejection, where good things approach and your system unconsciously pushes them away, not through action necessarily, through vibration, through the energetic frequency you are broadcasting, which is pain. And pain does not attract growth, it attracts more pain, because like energy attracts like energy. And if your identity is pain, your reality will be pain, until you do the work of releasing that identity and discovering who you are beneath it. This is why they sabotage, why they have patterns of almost making it then failing, almost healing, then relapsing, almost succeeding then self-destructing. It looks like bad luck, like the universe testing them, like they are cursed. But it is none of those things. It is energetic rejection. Their system recognizing that success, health, abundance would require being someone they do not know how to be, someone who is not defined by pain, and the unconscious, programmed to maintain homeostasis, to keep you as the self you recognize, rejects that version, sabotages that growth, blocks that energy, not maliciously, protectively, because to the unconscious, unknown feels more dangerous than painful familiar, so it keeps you in pain, keeps you stuck, keeps you identified with suffering, and calls it safety, when it is actually imprisonment. Imprisonment in an identity that blocks every form of growth you claim to want. Today, they are going to see the 4 ways pain identity blocks growth. The physical blockage that keeps the body sick and depleted. The financial blockage that keeps money flowing out instead of in. The relational blockage that attracts partners who reinforce the pain identity. And the spiritual blockage that prevents connection to source energy and higher consciousness. Look at these 4 blockages. Not with shame, not with despair, but with the recognition that Hermstring offers, that pain identity is not who you are. It is who you became to survive circumstances that taught you suffering was your role, and what was learned can be unlearned, what was constructed can be dissolved, what blocks energy can be released. But only when you finally see it, see how pain became identity, see how identity became blockage, see how blockage became your entire reality, and choose differently. Choose to release pain as self. Choose to discover who you are beneath the suffering. Choose to allow the growth you have been energetically rejecting because it requires becoming someone you do not yet know. Someone whose identity is not pain. Someone who is finally, fully free. Hermstring teaches that this work is not cognitive, not about positive thinking or affirmations. It is energetic. It is spiritual. It requires working with the subtle energy body, with the subconscious programming, with the pain identity at the soul level, and releasing it, dissolving it, allowing yourself to be repatterned at the energetic frequency of growth instead of pain. This is uncomfortable. This is disorienting. This feels like death. Because in a sense, it is. It is the death of the pain identity, the only self you have known, and that death is required for birth. Birth of the self that can receive, that can grow, that can embody the physical health, financial abundance, relational fulfillment, and spiritual connection that have been waiting for you to finally release the blockage. The energetic blockage created by identifying as pain. Make your choice. Which blockage do they recognize? And then stay. Because what comes next will not offer quick fixes or surface solutions. It will show them the depth work required to dissolve pain identity and finally allow the growth that has been trying to emerge for years, decades, a lifetime. If they recognize the physical blockage, the pattern where their body is always sick, always in pain, always depleted, they have identified the first way pain identity prevents growth. Their body has become the container for their pain identity, the physical manifestation of suffering as self. They do not just experience illness. They identify as ill. Do not just have pain, they are pain. Their body has learned that being sick is who they are. And healing would mean becoming someone their system does not recognize. So the body rejects healing. Unconsciously, energetically. Hermstring teaches that chronic illness, chronic pain, chronic fatigue that has no clear physical cause is often pain identity made flesh. The body holding the energetic pattern of suffering because suffering is identity. If physical blockage is their pattern, they are not sick because something is wrong with their body. They are sick because their body is expressing what is wrong with their energetic identity, and until the identity shifts, the body cannot fully heal. They developed this pattern through early programming. Maybe illness was the only time they received care, attention, love. So the body learned, being sick equals being loved. Maybe they witnessed a parent or caregiver whose identity was illness, who lived as victim of their body, and they absorbed that pattern. To be an adult is to suffer physically. Maybe they experienced trauma, and the body became the holder of what could not be processed emotionally. So pain went into the physical body and stayed there, becoming not just sensation but identity. Or maybe they simply learned through cultural messaging that bodies betray you, that aging means declining, that being human means suffering. And they internalized suffering as inevitable, as who they are, as what bodies do, and now their body obeys that belief, stays sick, stays in pain, stays depleted, because that is what bodies who identify as pain do. In Hermstring's framework, building on Jung, this is the shadow of the sick archetype dominating the psyche. The archetype that finds identity, meaning, and even perverse comfort in being unwell, not consciously. No one consciously chooses chronic illness, but unconsciously the sick archetype provides something. Attention. Permission to rest. Reason to not perform. Excuse for not achieving. Protection from expectations. And if these secondary gains are unconscious, if the person does not recognize that part of them needs the illness, the body will not release it, because releasing it means losing those gains, losing that identity, losing the role they have been playing. And the unconscious protects role over wellness, protects familiar over healing. Until the person consciously recognizes the pattern and chooses differently. People with this blockage live in perpetual physical crisis. They are always dealing with something, always in pain, always exhausted, always sick, and they have tried everything: doctors, specialists, alternative medicine, diets, exercise, supplements, and nothing fully works. Or things work temporarily, then symptoms return or new symptoms emerge because they are treating the physical manifestation without addressing the energetic identity. The body is not malfunctioning. The body is functioning perfectly according to the pain identity programming. It is expressing what the energetic system believes. I am someone who suffers, and as long as that belief operates at the identity level, the body will manifest it, will create the physical experience of suffering. Because body follows energy, and energy follows identity. And identity is pain, so body is pain, and all the physical interventions in the world cannot override energetic identity until that identity is consciously recognized and released. Breaking this blockage requires something radical. They must recognize that part of them is invested in being sick, not because they are weak or broken, but because illness has become identity, has become how they know themselves, has become their role, their story, their excuse, their protection. And they must be willing to grieve what they will lose if they heal: the attention, the permission to rest, the reason to not show up fully, the protection from life's demands. Hermstring teaches that you cannot heal what you are unwilling to lose, and if unconsciously you are using illness for something, your system will not release it until you find another way to meet that need. This requires deep honesty, requires admitting that part of you does not want to heal and asking why. What does being sick give you? What would you have to face if you were well? What would be expected of you? What would you lose? And then finding ways to meet those needs without requiring physical illness, to give yourself permission to rest without needing to be sick, to receive care without needing to suffer, to protect yourself from overwhelm without needing your body to fail. As they do this work, as they consciously release the pain identity and meet their needs differently, the body begins to respond, not overnight, but gradually, because body follows energy. And when energy shifts from pain as identity to wellness as possibility, body follows. Physical blockage dissolves, not through more treatment, through energetic release. If they recognize the financial blockage, the pattern where money never stays, where opportunities evaporate, where abundance approaches but never lands, they have identified the second way. Pain identity prevents growth. Their relationship with money is not practical. It is energetic. And their energetic frequency is calibrated to lack, to struggle, to barely surviving. Because financial suffering has become part of their identity, they do not just experience poverty, they identify as poor. Do not just have money problems, they are someone who struggles with money. And this identity creates an energetic field that repels abundance. Hermstring teaches that money is energy, and energy follows identity. If your identity is financial pain, your energetic field broadcasts, "I am someone who struggles." And the universe responds by giving you more struggle, not as punishment, as reflection. You receive energetically what you are energetically. If financial blockage is their pattern, they are not poor because they lack skills or opportunities. They are poor because their pain identity includes poverty consciousness. And until that identity shifts, money cannot stay, cannot grow, cannot manifest, because it vibrates at a frequency their identity rejects. They developed this pattern through financial trauma. Maybe they grew up poor and learned that struggling with money is what people like them do. Maybe they witnessed parents fight about money and absorbed the belief that money equals pain, conflict, stress. Maybe they experienced loss, bankruptcy, or financial devastation and made an unconscious vow: money is dangerous. I will never be vulnerable to losing it again, so I will never have it. Or maybe they absorbed spiritual or cultural beliefs that money is evil, that poverty is virtuous, that struggling financially proves you are good, while abundance proves you are corrupt. Whatever the source, they developed an identity where financial pain became part of who they are. And now they live it. Constantly, they make money and immediately lose it, get opportunities and sabotage them, approach success and self-destruct. Because abundance would require being someone whose identity is not financial struggle, and they do not know how to be that person. In Hermstring's framework, this is the poverty archetype dominating the financial aspect of self. The archetype that finds identity, safety, even moral superiority in lack. Not consciously. No one consciously chooses poverty, but unconsciously, the poverty archetype provides something: protection from responsibility that wealth would bring, permission to not play big because you do not have resources, moral high ground of suffering while others prosper, victim identity that attracts sympathy. And if these secondary gains operate unconsciously, the person will sabotage every attempt at financial growth, because growth threatens the identity, threatens what poverty provides unconsciously, and the system protects identity over abundance. Keeps you poor to keep you you, because poor is who you know yourself to be. And rich is a stranger you cannot become without dying to the familiar self. People with this blockage have specific patterns. They work hard, but never get ahead. Save money, then emergencies drain it. Receive opportunities, then somehow miss them. Get promotions, then lose the job. Start businesses that fail. Invest in things that lose value, and they believe they are cursed. That money hates them. That abundance is for other people. But Hermstring teaches it is not external. It is energetic. Their vibration is broadcasting poverty consciousness, and the universe, which is a mirror, reflects that back. They attract lack because they are energetically lack. They repel abundance because abundance does not match their identity. And no amount of positive thinking or manifesting techniques overrides identity-level programming, until they do the deep work of recognizing that poverty is not circumstance. Poverty is identity, and identity can be released. Breaking financial blockage requires confronting painful truths. They must admit that part of them is invested in staying poor. Not because they enjoy suffering, but because poverty has become familiar, has become how they know themselves, has become their story, their excuse, their protection from the vulnerability that wealth would require, and they must grieve what they will lose if they become abundant. The identity of struggler, the sympathy, the permission to not take risks because they do not have resources, the moral superiority of suffering. Hermstring teaches you cannot receive what you are energetically rejecting. And if poverty is identity, you are rejecting abundance at the soul level. The work is recognizing the secondary gains. What does being poor give you? What does struggling provide? What would you have to face if you were wealthy? What expectations would land? What responsibilities? What vulnerability? And then choosing to meet those needs differently, to find identity beyond financial struggle, to develop capacity for the expansion that abundance requires. As they do this work, as they release poverty consciousness and shift to abundance identity, money begins to respond. Not through hustling harder, through vibrating differently, through becoming energetically someone who has instead of someone who lacks. And money, which is energy, flows to the energetic match. Financial blockage dissolves when pain identity releases and abundance becomes the new energetic truth. If they recognize the relational blockage, the pattern where every relationship recreates pain, where partners reinforce suffering identity, where love equals struggle, they have identified the third way pain identity prevents growth. They do not attract partners randomly. They attract energetic matches. And if their identity is pain, they attract people who will create pain, not consciously, energetically. People who are unavailable, abusive, abandoning, betraying. Not because they are unlucky in love, but because love to their system is supposed to hurt. Relationship is supposed to be struggle. Partnership is supposed to recreate the pain that has become identity. Hermstring teaches that we do not attract what we want. We attract what we are. And if we are energetically pain, we attract people who will give us pain, not to torture us, to confirm our identity, to give us the familiar, to recreate the suffering that feels like home. If relational blockage is their pattern, they are not being rejected by good people. They are energetically rejecting good people and attracting people who match their pain identity. And until that identity shifts, every relationship will hurt, will struggle, will reinforce the belief that love equals suffering. They developed this relational pattern through early attachment trauma. Maybe their first models of love were parents who fought, who were cold, who abandoned. So they learned. Love is pain. Maybe they were betrayed early by a parent, by a first love, and made an unconscious vow. I will never trust again. I will only choose people who prove love hurts, because that is what I know. Maybe they were the family scapegoat, always blamed, never chosen and internalized. I am someone who is rejected, and now they prove it, in every relationship, by choosing people who reject them. Or by sabotaging relationships where they are actually chosen because being chosen does not match the identity of being rejectable. Or maybe they simply absorbed cultural narratives that love is sacrifice, that partnership is struggle, that suffering for someone proves you love them. And they embodied that, made relational pain into identity, and now they cannot imagine relationship without it. In Hermstring's model, this is the wounded lover archetype dominating relational energy. The archetype that seeks love but is terrified of actually having it. That pursues connection, but sabotages when it arrives. That says it wants partnership, but energetically broadcasts, "I am someone who suffers in relationship." And that broadcast attracts matching energy, people who will create suffering, who are emotionally unavailable, who are commitment phobic, who are users, takers, narcissists. Not because those are the only people available, but because those are the people whose energy matches pain identity. And unconsciously, the person with relational blockage prefers painful familiar over healthy unknown, prefers the struggle they know over the ease they do not, because ease does not feel like love when suffering is what love has always been. People with relational blockage repeat the same relationship with different people, different faces, same dynamic. They attract abandoners or become the abandoner. Attract controllers or become controlled. Attract betrayers or set themselves up to be betrayed. And they call it bad luck, call it toxic people everywhere, call it inability to find good partners. But Hermstring teaches it is energetic. Their pain identity is broadcasting a signal. And people who match that signal respond. People who will help them recreate the suffering that confirms who they believe they are. Meanwhile, healthy people, people who are available, stable, emotionally mature, feel wrong, feel boring, feel like there is no chemistry because there is no pain. And pain is what their system recognizes as love, so they reject healthy people. Or healthy people reject them after sensing the energetic blockage, the resistance to actual connection, the investment in pain over peace. Breaking relational blockage requires seeing that they are not victims of bad partners. They are unconscious participants in recreating relational pain, not consciously choosing abuse, but energetically magnetizing it through pain identity. The work is recognizing what relational pain provides. What does suffering in relationship give them? Permission to leave without guilt because the other person hurt them. Victim identity that attracts sympathy. Confirmation that they are unlovable, which matches their core belief. Protection from the vulnerability that real intimacy requires. Hermstring teaches that we stay in patterns that serve us unconsciously until we make the service conscious. Until we admit, part of me needs this pain. Part of me is choosing partners who hurt me. Because being hurt is familiar, is identity, is easier than the terrifying vulnerability of being loved fully. The work is releasing pain as requirement for love, recognizing that healthy relationship will feel strange, boring, wrong at first, because it does not match the pain identity, and staying with healthy anyway, choosing the person who does not trigger suffering, who offers stability instead of chaos, peace instead of drama, and discovering that love without pain is not less love. It is actual love, the kind that supports growth, the kind pain identity has been blocking because growth requires becoming someone who does not need to suffer to feel alive. If they recognize the spiritual blockage, the sense of being disconnected from source, from higher consciousness, from the divine flow of energy that some people seem to access naturally, they have identified the fourth and deepest way. Pain identity prevents growth. They are not just blocked physically, financially, relationally. They are blocked spiritually, cut off from the very energy that would heal, transform, and elevate them. And this is not because they are not spiritual enough, not because God or universe abandoned them, but because pain identity creates a specific energetic frequency, a low, dense, contracted frequency, and source energy, spiritual energy, divine consciousness operates at a different frequency, a high, light, expansive frequency. And frequencies that do not match cannot commune, cannot connect, cannot flow between each other. Hermstring teaches that spiritual blockage is the root of all other blockages, because spiritual energy is the source. And when you are disconnected from source, everything else, body, finances, relationships, struggles, not because you are being punished, but because you are operating without fuel, without the energy that powers growth, healing, abundance. If spiritual blockage is their pattern, they are not separate from divine because they are unworthy. They are separate because pain identity vibrates at a frequency that cannot receive spiritual energy. And until that identity shifts, they will remain spiritually empty, blocked, alone, even when surrounded by spiritual practices, teachers, or communities. They developed spiritual blockage through pain becoming not just experience but worldview. When suffering is all you know, when pain has been your constant companion, When struggle has defined your existence, you conclude, this is what life is. This is what being human means. And that conclusion creates a contracted energetic field, a closed system, a frequency that says I am separate, I am alone, I am suffering. And that frequency cannot access higher consciousness, cannot receive divine energy, because divine operates from union, connection, flow. And pain identity operates from separation, isolation, blockage. They are not compatible frequencies, so the person lives in what Hermstring calls spiritual poverty, going through spiritual motions, meditating, praying, seeking, but never actually connecting, never feeling the presence, never receiving the energy, because their identity level frequency is rejecting what they are consciously seeking. In Hermstring's integration of Jungian and spiritual psychology, this is the self being completely obscured by pain-identified ego. Jung taught that the self is the divine within, the connection to source, the archetypal core that links individual consciousness to universal consciousness. But when ego identifies entirely with pain, with suffering, with separation, it cannot perceive self, cannot access the divine connection that exists within. The person prays, but feels nothing, meditates but experiences only mental noise, seeks spiritual teachers but remains unchanged, not because they are doing it wrong, but because pain identity creates an energetic wall, a barrier between ego and self, between human and divine, between the person and the source energy that would heal everything if they could receive it. And they cannot receive it while identified as pain, while vibrating at the frequency of suffering. Because divine energy cannot force itself into a contracted field. It can only be received by an open one, and pain identity is the opposite of open. It is closed, defended, contracted, afraid. People with spiritual blockage feel abandoned by the divine, feel like God or universe does not hear their prayers, does not answer their calls, does not care about their suffering, and they become spiritually bitter, conclude that spirituality is for other people, that they are too broken, too damaged, too far gone to be reached by grace. But Hermstring teaches this is the pain identity speaking, creating the very separation it complains about. Because as long as they identify as suffering, as separate, as abandoned, they vibrate at a frequency that cannot access source, cannot receive spiritual energy, cannot open to the divine flow that is always available, but can only be received by those whose identity allows reception. The blockage is not divine rejection. The blockage is self-created through pain identity, through identifying so completely with suffering that expansion, grace, and spiritual connection become impossible, not because they are not offered, but because the energetic field created by pain identity cannot receive them. Breaking spiritual blockage requires the most fundamental shift. They must release pain as identity at the soul level, must recognize that they are not their suffering. That beneath the pain, beneath the struggle, beneath all the years of identifying as wounded, there is something else, something Hermstring, following Jung, calls the true self, the divine spark, the essence that existed before pain and will exist after pain. And that essence is what connects to source, but it cannot be accessed while ego is completely identified with pain. The work is spiritual in the truest sense, not religious practices, but energetic work, dissolving the pain identity at the soul level, releasing the contraction, opening the field, shifting frequency from suffering to openness. And this is terrifying, because pain identity provides something, a known self, an identity, a story. And releasing it feels like dying, because in a sense it is death, death of the pain self, so that the true self can finally emerge, can finally connect to source, can finally receive the spiritual energy that has been waiting for the blockage to dissolve, waiting for pain identity to release, waiting for the person to finally open and allow divine energy to flow. And when it does, when the blockage dissolves and source energy flows again, everything changes. Body heals, money flows, relationships transform, not through effort, through energetic alignment, through finally vibrating at the frequency of source instead of the frequency of suffering. Now that they have seen the 4 blockages, physical, financial, relational, spiritual, and understood how each manifests from pain identity, It is time to integrate what Owen Hermstring discovered building on Jungian psychology. Pain is not just something that happens to you. Pain is something you can become. And when you become pain, when suffering shifts from experience to identity, you create an energetic system that blocks growth in every dimension. Physical growth blocked because the body holds pain identity. Financial growth blocked because prosperity consciousness cannot exist alongside poverty identity. Relational growth blocked because you attract partners who confirm suffering as love. Spiritual growth blocked because pain identity vibrates at a frequency that cannot receive source energy. Hermstring's breakthrough was recognizing that these are not separate problems. They are one problem, one identity, pain identity. And healing is not about fixing 4 separate areas. It is about dissolving one core identity, the identity of being someone who suffers. Jung laid the groundwork by teaching that we are not just conscious ego, we are also unconscious material, shadow, archetypes, complexes, and much of what we call me is actually programming, conditioning, patterns absorbed in childhood that became identity without conscious choice. Hermstring took this further by identifying that pain specifically becomes identity in ways that create energetic blockages. That suffering is not just psychological, it is energetic, and energetic patterns create physical, financial, relational, and spiritual realities. That we live not just from beliefs but from vibrational frequency, and the frequency of pain identity is low, contracted, dense. It attracts more pain, blocks growth, repels abundance, health, love, and divine connection. Not because the person is bad or cursed, but because energetic law is precise. You receive what you are. And if you are pain, you receive pain. In body, in bank account, in relationship, in spiritual emptiness. But here is what both Jung and Hermstring understood that changes everything. Identity is not fixed. What was constructed can be dissolved. What was learned can be unlearned. What became identity through pain can be released through awareness and energetic work. The pain identity is not who you are. It is who you became to survive circumstances that were painful. It was adaptive. It served you. It helped you make sense of suffering. It gave you identity when everything else was chaos. But what was adaptive then is destructive now. What helped you survive pain is now preventing you from living beyond pain. And you have a choice. You can keep identifying as pain, keep vibrating at that frequency, keep manifesting blockages in every area. Or you can do the work. The deep, difficult, terrifying work of releasing pain as self, of discovering who you are beneath the suffering, of shifting identity and therefore shifting frequency. And when frequency shifts, everything shifts. Body heals, money flows, relationships transform, spiritual connection opens, not through fixing each area individually, but through dissolving the one identity that blocked all 4. Hermstring's method, drawing from Jung's individuation process, is energetic shadow work. It requires confronting the ways pain has become identity. This means asking brutal questions. What does being in pain give me? What does suffering provide? What would I lose if I stopped being someone who struggles? Who would I be without pain as my defining characteristic? And sitting with the answers, which are usually uncomfortable. Suffering provides identity, sympathy, permission to not show up fully, protection from expectations, excuse for not achieving, moral superiority. And if these gains are unconscious, you will sabotage every attempt to heal, because healing threatens what suffering provides, threatens who you know yourself to be. And the unconscious protects known over healthy until you make it conscious, until you see clearly, I have been choosing pain because pain gives me something. And then choosing differently. Choosing to meet those needs without requiring suffering, to find identity beyond pain, to develop capacity to be someone who thrives instead of someone who merely survives. The 4 blockages dissolve together, not sequentially, simultaneously, because they are all manifestations of one energetic pattern, pain identity. As you release that identity, as you shift frequency from suffering to possibility, body responds by releasing chronic conditions. Finances respond by allowing money to flow and stay. Relationships respond by attracting healthy partners or transforming current dynamics. Spirituality responds by opening connection to source. This is not magic. This is energetic law. Frequency determines reality. Identity determines frequency. Change identity, change frequency, change reality. Hermstring teaches this is not quick, not easy. Pain identity did not form overnight. It will not dissolve overnight, but it will dissolve. Through patient, persistent, conscious work of making unconscious identity conscious, of seeing how pain became who you are instead of what you experienced, and choosing to be something else. Someone else. Not someone you construct, but someone you discover beneath the pain, the true self. That Jung taught exists in everyone, that Hermstring teaches has been waiting for pain identity to finally release so growth can finally begin. So now they understand that pain identity creates the 4 blockages, that releasing the identity dissolves the blocks. But understanding is not transformation. Practice is required. Daily, energetic, conscious practice of dissolving pain as self and discovering who exists beneath it. Hermstring's method combines Jungian shadow work with energetic practices that shift vibrational frequency. This is not cognitive, not about changing thoughts. It is about changing identity at the energetic level. About becoming someone who does not vibrate at the frequency of pain. Here is how they actually do this work. The first practice is identity inventory. They must see clearly how pain has become who they are. This means writing, making lists, getting brutally honest. They write, I am someone who, and complete it with all the ways pain defines them. I am someone who struggles, who is always sick, who never has enough money, who gets hurt in relationships, who feels spiritually empty. Every identity statement that contains suffering, and then they sit with it. They ask, what does this identity give me? What does being this person allow? What does it excuse? What does it protect me from? And they write those answers too. Usually uncomfortable truths. Being sick gives me permission to rest without guilt. Being poor gives me excuse to not take risks. Being hurt in relationships gives me victim identity that attracts sympathy. Being spiritually blocked gives me reason to feel special in my suffering. They must see the secondary gains, what suffering provides that they unconsciously do not want to lose. Because until they see it, they cannot release it. The second practice is energetic clearing. They must learn to shift frequency consciously. This is not meditation in the usual sense. It is energetic work. Daily practice of feeling the contracted, dense, heavy frequency of pain identity and consciously releasing it. They sit. They breathe. They notice where pain lives in their body, usually solar plexus, heart, or throat, and they visualize it as dark, heavy energy. And with each exhale, they release it. Imagine it flowing out, down through their body, into the earth. They practice this 20 minutes daily, releasing the energetic density of pain identity, and as they release, they consciously invite different energy, light, expansive, high-frequency energy. They visualize it entering crown of head, flowing through body, filling spaces where pain used to live. This is not visualization as imagination. This is energetic practice, actually shifting the frequency of the energy body from pain to possibility, from contraction to expansion, from suffering to receptivity. Daily practice gradually repatterns the energetic system, teaches body, nervous system, energy field to vibrate differently, to be someone who does not identify as pain. The third practice is conscious choice against pattern. They must catch themselves choosing pain and choose differently. In moment when opportunity arises for health, money, relationship, spiritual connection, and they feel impulse to reject it, sabotage it, run from it, they pause. They recognize this is pain identity trying to maintain itself, and they choose differently, even when it feels wrong, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it requires being someone they do not recognize. When someone available shows interest, instead of rejecting them for having no chemistry, they stay. They date the available person. They let themselves be treated well. When money flows in, instead of immediately spending it on emergency or loss, they keep it. They save it. They prove to themselves that money can stay. When body feels better, instead of immediately pushing until sick again, they rest. They protect the wellness. They prove to system that being well is safe. Each conscious choice against pattern rewires the identity, proves that growth will not destroy them, that they can be someone who does not suffer and still exist. The fourth practice is identity reclamation. They must discover who they are beneath pain. This requires what Hermstring calls essence work, daily practice of sitting in silence and asking, who am I without pain, without the suffering identity, without the story of struggle? And waiting, not thinking, not making up answers, but waiting for the true self to emerge, for the essence beneath conditioning to reveal itself. This is subtle work. The answers come as feelings, as knowings, as quiet presence, not as dramatic revelation. They practice this daily, sitting with the question, allowing identity that is not pain to slowly surface, to become known. And as they come to know themselves as something other than suffering, as someone who exists independent of pain, the old identity loses power, gradually. Until one day they realize, I am not someone who suffers, I am someone who experienced suffering, but it is not who I am. That shift, from pain as identity to pain as experience, is the breakthrough, is what dissolves all four blockages, because when pain is no longer identity, the energetic system can finally receive growth, can finally allow health, abundance, love, and spiritual connection, because those no longer threaten self. They enhance self, the self that exists beyond pain. That Hermstring and Jung both taught is who we actually are, waiting beneath the identity of suffering to finally be discovered and lived. They have walked through something today that most people never see. They have recognized that they are stuck, not because growth is not available, but because pain has become their identity. And that identity creates energetic blockages that prevent physical health, financial abundance, relational fulfillment, and spiritual connection, not as punishment. As energetic law, frequency attracts matching frequency, and pain identity broadcasts pain frequency, which attracts pain in body, money, relationship, and spirit. They thought the problem was external, bad health, bad luck, bad partners, bad karma. But Owen Hermstring showed them something different. The problem is internal, is energetic, is identity level, is the way suffering stopped being something they experienced and became something they are. And until that shifts, nothing else can shift. Until pain identity dissolves, the blockages remain. Until frequency changes, reality cannot change. Because reality is not random. Reality is reflection of energetic identity. Owen Hermstring, building on Carl Jung's depth psychology, discovered that transformation is not about fixing symptoms, not about treating the body, changing financial strategies, choosing better partners, or practicing more spirituality. Transformation is about dissolving the identity that creates all four blockages, the pain identity, the suffering self, the person they became in response to circumstances that were painful and that they survived by making pain into who they are. And that identity, though it served them once, is now the primary obstacle to growth, to healing, to abundance, to love, to divine connection. It must be released, dissolved, energetically transformed, not through denial, not through positive thinking, but through deep, honest work of making unconscious identity conscious, of seeing how pain became self, of recognizing the secondary gains, of choosing to meet needs differently, and of discovering who exists beneath the suffering. The true self that Jung and Hermstring both teach is who we actually are when we stop identifying as pain. The work is not fast, is not easy. Pain identity formed over years, sometimes decades, sometimes lifetime. It will not dissolve in a weekend workshop or through reading a book. It requires persistent practice, daily energetic work, continuous choice against pattern, constant return to the question, who am I without pain? And sitting with that question until answers emerge, until the true self begins to surface, until identity shifts from pain to something else, something Hermstring calls essence, the part of you that exists independent of circumstances, that is whole regardless of experience. That is connected to source regardless of suffering. As you discover that self, as you begin to identify as that instead of as pain, frequency shifts, energetically, measurably. And as frequency shifts, the four blockages begin to dissolve. Body releases chronic conditions that pain identity was holding. Money begins to flow and stay because prosperity consciousness can finally integrate. Relationships transform because you attract different energy or heal current dynamics. Spiritual connection opens because your frequency can finally access Source. Not through 4 separate healing processes, through one identity shift that changes everything. Which blockage did they recognize? Physical, financial, relational, spiritual? And having recognized it, what will they do? Will they continue believing they are victim of circumstances, that their body betrays them, money hates them, love hurts them, God abandoned them? Or will they understand what Hermstring revealed, that they are not victim, they are unconscious participant, creating blockages through pain identity? Through identifying so completely with suffering that growth became impossible, through vibrating at frequency that attracts more pain, and that they can choose differently, can release pain as identity, can discover who they are beneath suffering, can shift frequency and therefore shift reality. Share which blockage they recognized. Their awareness might help someone else see that their stuckness is not fate, is energetic, is identity, is changeable. Subscribe for more Hermstring and Jungian psychology on dissolving pain identity and allowing growth. 2 more videos appearing now. Choose one to continue. Until we meet again, remember this. People only know pain, not because pain is all there is, but because pain has become who they are, a blockage, an identity, an energetic frequency that prevents physical health, financial abundance, relational love, and spiritual connection. Not because they are cursed or unworthy, but because energetic law is precise. You receive what you are, and if you are pain, you receive pain, in every dimension, until you do the work, the deep work of making pain identity conscious, of seeing how suffering became self, of recognizing what it provides, of choosing to meet needs differently, of discovering who exists beneath the pain, of shifting identity from suffering to essence, of changing frequency from contraction to expansion. And when that shift happens, when pain stops being who you are and becomes what you experienced, everything changes. The blockages dissolve, not through fixing symptoms, through dissolving cause, through releasing the identity that created all 4 blocks, through becoming finally someone who can receive, who can grow, who can heal, who can thrive. That person is not someone you construct. That person is who you actually are. Beneath the pain, beneath the identity of suffering, waiting to finally be discovered, to finally be lived,